Hey there everyone, this is Samuel Johnson, and welcome back to the MCU Perspectives, and today we're going to be discussing the 16th film to be released as part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, Spider-Man Homecoming. And since this is his first solo foray into the MCU, I can now finally talk about my history with honestly, one of my favorite superheroes of all time. And, well, even with, I guess I can easily say, well, it all started with Sony, is what I'm saying. When I first discovered how I first discovered Spider-Man was through the Sam Raimi movies. When I was a little kid, when the first Spider-Man film came out, the typical superhero for me was someone who ran around in some kind of tights with a cape and who was muscular and could possibly fly. As such, when I started seeing some stuff about Spider-Man, I thought he looked weird. Just this character with this red and blue costume. He didn't have a cape. He looked kind of skinny. He actually looked angry and somewhat threatening to my young mind. And he didn't have a cape. He was supposed to be a superhero, but for me, they had to have a cape. It's shallow thinking, I admit, but they had to have a cape. You just don't have a cape. If you don't have a cape, you're not a superhero to me. But my parents wound up still wound up getting the movie on DVD, and I did ultimately sit down and watch it with them. And I actually liked it, and that was me kind of going in with a somewhat cynical mind. Like we got a prose comic at a Walmart that was a slight adaptation of the story. That was a slight adaptation of the movie. I heard that there actually was more. There actually was a much larger comic adaptation of the film that you can probably go out and buy, but I read that and I thought it was all right, and I actually did want to, and part of the reason I didn't want to see the film was, again, I didn't like spiders, still don't, hate them. If I see them, I gotta kill them. But again, my parents still got the movie, and I still sat down and watched it with them, and I was pleasantly surprised. I actually found myself liking it, seeing this kid suddenly stick to walls, swinging around New York with webs out of his wrist. I thought it was really fun. Seeing him fighting bad guys and monsters. I actually seeing him fighting this big green weirdo on a glider. I thought it was really fun to watch, and I enjoyed myself. I enjoyed myself a lot. And from there, I got more invested into the Spider-Man mythos. And it helped that the disc 2 of the DVD had bios on stuff of Spider-Man lore, like his supporting cast, his love interests, and even his enemies. Seeing that just made me more interested in seeing the character, and so from there I started seeing more I started seeing more stuff about the character. I started looking out for cartoon shows, comic books, just all these stuff that had the character, and I just thought it was so fun. I liked seeing this. My favorite villain, of course, was Venom. I loved Venom, still do. For the longest time, I thought Venom was just like this evil, and for the longest time, I thought Venom was just like an evil Spider-Man. But I ultimately learned more about the character by watching the Venom saga in the Spider-Man animated series, which I actually recommend if you haven't seen that yet. I recommend it. But I'm gushing a bit, but I just found myself in love with the character. I had to see everything about them, and I was just enjoying myself. I didn't know everything, of course, but I still liked watching more and more, and I wanted to see more about how it came to be. And of course, as the films kept coming out, I kept going to see them, and I kept enjoying myself. But eventually the movies did kind of get derailed with the release of Spider-Man 3. And while as a kid I did enjoy Spider-Man 3, rewatching it now, I can definitely see a lot of the cracks. There's still stuff in there I like, but it's definitely not a perfect film. As such, Spider-Man in film kind of died for a little while. And how I was able to get my Spider-Man fix was through DVDs, the more cartoon shows, Spectacular Spider-Man especially. Once again, check it out if you haven't. Really good show. But eventually, Spider-Man was able to come back. With the Marvel Cinematic Universe in full swing, Sony was not exactly willing to give up their rights to Spider-Man. And so to try and cash in on him some more, they attempted to make their own Spider-Man cinematic universe. Rebooting the films and trying to make their own cinematic universe centered around Spider-Man. It didn't end well. And before I get into that, and before I talk about the fallout from that, I will just briefly talk about the Amazing Spider-Man movies. I enjoy them personally, But with that said, I can see why a lot of people don't. I can see the cracks, is what I'm saying. When I saw the first Amazing Spider-Man film, I definitely did kind of walk out of the theater questioning it. But at the end of the day, I still wanted to like it, and I did actually, and there was still some good stuff in there that I enjoyed. And I do genuinely enjoy the sequel. I understand why a lot of people don't like it. Fair enough. Fair enough. There are some very big problems with them, and I can understand that. But I do actually like the Amazing Spider-Man films. I understand why they failed, but I do like them. But with that being said, part of the reason they failed was because they tried making an entire cinematic universe just centered around one character. And unfortunately, they made the fatal flaw that all these other films they're trying to make cinematic universes did. Namely, they tried to build up so much with so little. Instead of just focusing on the story they had in the movie, they were just too busy trying to set up for future sequels and spin-offs. Which is unfortunately something you should not really be focusing on when making these movies. Like, as an example, when it came down to the first Iron Man film, if you watched the entire movie and didn't see the after credits scene, it's a movie that could easily stand on its own. It's a singular movie that was just trying to set up a single character. And even other solo films that tried to set up other characters weren't too concerned with being too connected to the greater cinematic universe beyond some subtle hints here and there. Like, again, with Thor, we did see S.H.I.E.L.D., but at the same time, you could just say S.H.I.E.L.D. was brought out there because of Mjolnir. Captain America, that connection at the end, but still, you could easily watch the film and still just enjoy everything for Captain America. It's just everything. The films did lay down the ground for future films, but they were more concerned with telling their own stories most of the time. Sometimes they relied on other continuities, but by that point, they had already established enough continuity that they could do that. But again, as such, with Amazing Spider-Man 2, they tried building up too much with too little, and it just fell flat on its face and bombed. As such, with the Marvel Cinematic Universe continuing to go forward and being a huge success, it eventually resulted in Sony and Marvel finally sitting down and talking about bringing Spider-Man into the MCU. Now, when I first heard talk about this, I was a little skeptical that it would actually work out. I mean, on one hand, I wanted to see Spider-Man in the MCU. I would love it if Spider-Man had joined the I thought it would be a cool idea. I thought it'd be cool if Spider-Man was in the MCU. But with that being said, I had seen that they've been planning on making future films in the future, more films, and it looked like Spider-Man just wasn't on that list anywhere. So I didn't know how so I've kind of thought, well, what are they going to do? How are they going to work with this? And on top of that, from what I've heard recently from interviews after the split, we'll call it. I'll talk about that. I'll probably will talk about that either in this video or a later one. But I heard apparently the deal, even striking the deal, was tenuous at best. Apparently Kevin Feige had to jump through a lot of hoops, just through a lot of hoops just to get the deal and just to even get the deal as it was. And eventually a deal was struck. Essentially, Sony and Marvel would share Spider-Man for the movies. Pretty much, Sony would primarily be the ones that distributed the movies, fund everything, get it all off the ground, with Marvel giving a helping hand and giving a guiding hand, like with Kevin Feige still doing executive producing work, even still being the executive producer to keep it all lined up with the cinematic universe. And in return, as for the funds, Sony would be getting the majority of the funds, while Disney would get 5% of the day one funds and all merchandising rights. And with that deal in mind, Sony would be able to make films that were set in the cinematic universe, and Marvel would be able to freely use Spider-Man in any crossover for any other films they had in the mix that weren't Spider-Man related, like with Captain America: Civil War. Which, yeah, with that deal in mind, the reveal was still one of the greatest things was still one of the greatest reveals. And so Spider-Man was in the MCU, and yeah, it was awesome. When I first saw the trailer for Civil War and saw Spider-Man swinging in and saying, "Hey guys," I just thought, oh my god, he's finally there. And he looked so great. And then actually seeing him in Civil War, it was so fun. Seeing him fighting alongside and against the Avengers, actually seeing him quipping, geeking out, doing his Spider-Man thing, but with all the other Marvel superheroes, minus the X-Men and Fantastic Four. I thought, this is amazing. Seeing Spider-Man finally here, it was amazing. And I just couldn't, and so I just thought, wow. Wow! It was just finally great to see him as a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And so, of course, when the solo film was announced and they said was in production, you could bet your ass I was going to go see it. Even if it wasn't Cinematic Universe, I was probably going to go see it. I pretty much made a pact with myself, stating that if they made a new Spider-Man movie, I'd go see it. So, well, as such, when the film was finally released, I decided to make a day of it. I had to go pay off a bit of a hospital bill. And as such, after that, I went to the nearest theater, sat down, and I saw Spider-Man Homecoming, and I enjoyed it. I really did. I thought it was really fun, And so, 2 years later, what do I think of it? Well, let's get to that long plot summary. In terms of when this film takes place, it takes place about 2 months after the events of Civil War. Pretty much ever since that event, Peter has kind of been a little anxious, we'll call it. Pretty much what had happened was that he was just pretty much after Civil War, Peter was pretty much sent on his way by Tony, and as a thank you, Tony gave him, and just kind of as a gift, Tony let him keep the suit that Tony made for him, which actually was kind of nice. Apparently, it was actually nice, yeah. Because with the beginning of that part of the film actually featured Peter geeking out and going crazy as he's making a little video diary of him being sent out to be part of Civil War, and even seeing him adding to it in the middle of the battle. It was actually really funny. I liked that. And so Tony very much told him, and so Peter said, well, what are we going to do? What's the next mission? And Tony said, we'll just call you. As such, Peter, and he also told Peter that in order to keep in mind that if he had any questions, just to call Happy, as he was pretty much the go-between. As such, the film then cuts to 2 months later, and as Peter has not been called in, and apparently he's been hassling Happy to high heaven. Alliteration. And just kind of bugging him, saying, well, I'm ready, I'm just waiting for the next mission, just let Tony know, yeah. Pretty much just kind of being a teenager, just I can just say. As such, in the meantime, Peter's just been kind of trying to get back into his groove, but at the same time, he's still kind of anxious. Like, during the day, he tries to do the high school thing, but his mind is wandering, and he's focusing, he is kind of focusing more on his Spider-Man stuff. He's constantly watching the clock, but then again, all students are watching the clock. Apparently, he's skipped extracurricular activities, except for a quiz decathlon, and even then he's trying to get out of a trip to DC for this big tournament, and pretty much his cover is that he has an internship at Stark Industries. Pretty much he just seems to be neglecting his day-to-day life. As even during class, he's actually just trying to develop ways to doing his Spider-Man stuff. Like during chemistry, he's actually making more web fluid. He's watching videos of himself on YouTube doing the superhero thing. Pretty much trying everything he can to be. He's pretty much just focusing more on Spider-Man than Peter Parker. As such, even to the point where he's neglecting to hang out with his friends, including this kid named Ned. However, once school is let out, Peter actually runs off and goes full into his Spidey jammies as he begins just doing his Spider-Man thing, going around the neighborhood, stopping muggers, catching criminals, just doing the superhero thing. It's also here we get our Stan Lee cameo, as one of the crooks he stops is this guy looking like he's trying to break into a car, and Spider-Man stops him, only to reveal that this guy actually owns the car, and he apparently was locked out of it. And so Spider-Man stopping him to set the car alarm off, so all the neighbors are now just yelling at him for causing a hassle. And one of the neighbors is Stanley, who just says, "Don't make me come down there, you punks!" And one of the neighbors actually sees standing there and just start talking about their lives and their kids, etc. But at some point, But even through all this, Peter does still keep calling Happy and tells him, can you still put me through? Just let me know what's going on. I think I can do more. I think I can do more. I shouldn't be this way. He's just pretty much just trying to. He thinks that he just wants to try and prove himself as a tourer. However, as the night goes on, Peter sees a group of muggers breaking into a bank, and he thinks that this is probably something big. As such, he goes in and once again does a Spidey thing as he starts quipping and all the muggers are wearing Avengers masks, and so he starts making comments like, "Oh, the Avengers! It's so nice to meet you!" And they immediately get into this fight scene. But during the fight, Peter notices that the weapons they're wielding aren't exactly standard issue, as they shoot energy rays. One seems to be a suspension device that they use to knock Spidey around. It just pretty much is just like he realizes that this stuff is just all over They realize that this is not normal. As such, while Peter is able to stop them in the middle of the chaos, one of their guns goes off and shoots out a ray that kind of slices right through the bank building and hits a sandwich shop that's across the street that Peter frequents. And while no one inside while the owner is safe and sound as Peter goes to save him and his cat, pretty much it has caused a scene, and Peter realizes that something's a little up. As such, that night after this, he tries going back. He does try to go where he kept his civilian clothes, but the backpack that they were in was stolen, so he has to go back to his house. Only when he gets there, it turns out that Ned's there waiting for him. As you see earlier in the day, Ned had said that he'd gotten the pieces to build a Lego Death Star, and so he wanted to see if Peter wanted it. But Peter kind of brushed him off, saying that he had the internship, and then he had the internship. As such, he got it started and decided to come over to help so that he and Peter could finish the Death Star. And so he was waiting in Peter's room for him to come home, but Peter wound up crawling in through the window in his full Spider-Man regalia, and then crawled to the floor and took off his mask right in front of Ned, whom he didn't see until Ned reacted by dropping the Death Star. As such, Ned just starts geeking out and going nuts because he realizes Peter is Spider-Man, and Peter keeps trying to calm him down, saying, "No, so you can't do. So you gotta keep this secret. You gotta keep this secret. You can't tell May." And he's just pretty much going nuts. But eventually, Peter does manage to get him to quiet down, and especially since he doesn't want him telling his Aunt May that he's Spider-Man, because he says he doesn't want her worrying about that if she knew, she wouldn't let him go out and fight crime anymore, and especially with things that have recently happened with her, he just doesn't want her to worry about what's happening with him in this day-to-day life. Again, small subtle implication of what could have happened to Uncle Ben. They never say what happens to him, but it is heavily implied. As such, he is able to get Ned to swear an oath of secrecy, but Peter eventually does start. But at the same time, Aunt May comes in, apparently having pretty much screwed up whatever meal she was cooking for the night, and she decides that she and Peter are going to go out, and so Ned is sent home. And he asks, how can you do this and the Stark internship? To which Peter responds, "This is the internship." And so Ned realized that was just his cover. As such, Ned, of course, the next day is just geeking out over everything, just wanting to tell. It's just geeking out over all this because he's like, "Oh man, this is a." It's like, oh man, he's just asking all these questions, like how he got his powers, of course, the spider bite, what does he do, how he goes about it, does he lay eggs, and Peter, of course, is just trying to dodge each question as he's just trying to get through the day without anybody realizing what's going on. But Ned just keeps geeking out and going nuts. That's to the point where in gym class, he just keeps asking all these questions, and Peter gets so distracted that he almost blows his cover. However, as they're doing this questioning, they overhear a girl talking with her friends, and this is a girl that Peter's actually had a crush on. This is Liz Allen, and she's kind of the head of their academic decathlon team. And she's pretty, she's nice, she's involved in all these school sports, and Peter's been crushing on her hard, and Peter crushes on her hard. However, during gym, Peter and Ned end up hearing Liz and her friends talking about superheroes, and Liz says that she kind of has and they overhear that Liz kind of has a crush on Spider-Man. As such, Ned, trying to be the supportive best friend, emphasis on trying, actually hears this and blurts out that Peter knows Spider-Man, which pretty much gets everyone in the gym to look at them and give them looks. Peter tries shushing him up, and he tries covering it up by saying, "Yeah, I know him through the Stark internship. I met him like a couple times." But of course, some people are skeptical, including this universe's incarnation of Flash Thompson. And I will give kudos to how they handle Flash Thompson in this. He's not a white blonde kid who's a jock. He's instead this. I don't know if I want to say Indian, but he is darker skinned, and instead of being a jock, he's essentially the my dad could buy your dad type of kid. The ones whose parents are rich and they lord that over you. Either way, still a dick, and God bless him for that. God bless him for that. Flash is just like one of those endearing characters that you both love and hate, and this character, and the version they have here is definitely the one that fits. This version definitely fits the archetype. As such, he doesn't believe that Peter knows Spider-Man. But to kind of try and prove a point, to try and quote unquote prove it, they invite Peter to a party that Liz is hosting that evening, and they say that maybe they can get Spider-Man to show up. As such, Ned thinks this is just like a golden opportunity that they'll be able to use this to get even more popular. But as such, Peter and Ned end up going to the party later, and Ned, of course, is wearing this like stupid hat, like it looks like a playa hat kind of. And pretty much the plan is that he wants Peter to come in as Spider-Man and just kind of schmooze around, saying, "Oh man, I know Peter. And look, hey, there's Ned. Nice to see you, man." But Peter, of course, isn't going for it. As such, when they're dropped off at Liz Allen's house, Peter, of course, is originally not going to do it. But then Flash Thompson is working the DJ and pretty much just says, "Where's your friend Spider-Man, Penis Parker? Parker, that's not him. That's your fat friend." And that pretty much convinces, and that finally gets Peter to actually suit up and plan on how he's going to swing in. Though he's still kind of having second thoughts. However, before he can swing into the party, he sees something in the distance. He sees this just charge of energy from the skyline. And so, rather than go right into the party, he decides that he's going to go investigate. And what he finds are two weapons dealers meeting with a guy that we later learn is named Aaron Davis, who wants to pretty much just buy a simple firearm to just do some basic crime stuff, like hold up a store, get someone, like mug somebody, just pretty much something to have on him As such, they're showing him all this cool stuff, and he doesn't really go for it because the stuff they're selling is like big over the top, and he doesn't want it, and he doesn't want to harm anybody. I took notes via paper this time. My phone was updating while I was watching the movie, so I couldn't use it, so I didn't dare use it to write notes. However, as Spidey comes in and sees the deal go down, his phone goes off as Ned is calling him, asking him where the heck he is. However, hearing that, they think that the arms dealers think that Aaron screwed them over, and so they want to try and shoot him. As such, Spidey swings in and says, "Hey, if you're going to shoot anybody, shoot me." And so they kind of open fire on him, using the technology, using their high-tech arms, which are pretty much just giant energy blasts, which they use to shoot Peter. And one of the guys has this energy gauntlet, has this electric gauntlet that he uses to punch Spider-Man away as they get into their van and drive off. Spidey tries going after them in a car chase, and pretty much in the chase they call their boss saying that they need some help. As such, we get this nice, slightly humorous chase scene as Spider-Man just keeps sliding on the back of their car, trying to follow after them until eventually his web is cut and the back door, and one of the doors that he was webbing up falls off. As such, we see him just jumping through all these various backyards trying to keep up with the car and just kind of goofing up. But eventually he does manage to get to it, but before he can actually jump onto the car, something catches him and starts flying up into the air. And that something is the Vulture. And I should probably talk about him, because I've been neglecting the Vulture's backstory. And it is something tied again to the MCU. In this continuity, the Vulture is... Well, actually, scratch it. He's like this in every... He's this in every continuity. In this continuity, the Vulture is a man by the name of Adrian Toomes, who is pretty much who's pretty much a guy who he's pretty much a scrap worker. Like, he was the guy that went in, like, if there was like a major accident and a building was toppled, he and his crew would come in, pick up the slack, and then pick up all the various parts, and then sell whatever the city didn't buy as spare parts. And after the events of Avengers, he and his crew were picking up the old Chitauri tech and were planning to do the same thing to that, only for their jobs to get upended by a new organization called Damage Control, which Tony Stark was funding. As such, they and their crew were pretty much out of a job, which did not help because Adrian had already rented a bunch of trucks, a bunch of stuff. Pretty much he had gone the whole 9 yards of this whole thing, and now he was going to come up empty. As such, he was told by Damage Control they had to turn over all their stuff to them, and they'd be cleaning up the rest of it. Which did not sit well with Toombs, especially when one guy said you shouldn't have just gone all out. All out, resulting in Toombs just decking the guy, and rightfully so. He was kind of being a dick. However, later on, as they were reeling from this, it turns out they wound up keeping some of the tech, and rather than turning it over to Damage Control, they decided to keep it for themselves and repurpose it, as they realized with the Avengers in the world, things were changing. They couldn't. If they wanted to still make a living, they had to evolve too. As such, he and his crew, so to speak, pretty much became extra normal arms dealers. What they did is that they took the tech that they had stolen and repurposed it into weapons that could be sold that they sold on the black market for thugs, thieves, and other various hoodlums to use. And some of the tech was repurposed into a flight suit that Adrian uses, which is where we get the Vulture persona. So pretty much he and his guys, to try and keep up with demand, will usually head up any Damage Control trucks trying to steal any tech they have, and then after they have it, they repurpose it into something big. They repurpose the tech into just weapons. Hence the gun that was used for the demonstration with Aaron Davis. And the glove, which I'm just going to call the Shocker glove, because that's what it is. This film technically has 2 Spider-Man villains in it, but Shocker is just kind of a beat player in this film, so yeah, But anyway, yeah. But yeah, the Vulture Vulture comes in to save his guys' hide, and and so he flies Peter up so high that it turns out a parachute in his suit goes off, and Peter ends up gets pulled out of his grasp and falls to the earth, eventually landing in the Hudson River. However, he's tangled up in his parachute and seems to be drowning until Iron Man comes and saves him. Tony pretty much tells Peter that why was he doing that. Peter tells him that he saw something weird going on. He went to investigate. Let's get the guy to look into it. There's probably underground selling, but Tony pretty much tells Peter to stay out of this, because this is something above his pay grade. This is something big, so he wants Peter to kind of stay away from it. Peter is just trying to say, well, we need to investigate. Well, investigate. Well, you came all this way to help me. We could probably do this, but Tony pretty much tells him, no, actually, I'm not even really here. As it turns out, the Iron Man armor is being piloted remotely, a la the tech from Iron Man 3, or at least from his glasses. As we see that Tony is actually in, I think, India, but don't quote me on that. And the reason he was able to track Peter is because there's actually a tracking device in the suit as well as a heater, which helps warm Peter up. As he just tells Peter to leave well enough alone that he doesn't want him getting involved in this, and so after that he hangs up and has the suit fly away. Peter, of course, is grumbling because he thinks that Tony's just kind of sidelining him. He thinks he can be helpful, but in the midst of everything, as he's grumbling and going away, he finds one of the weapons that the bad guys are using on the ground, kind of damaged, and so he decides to pick it up and take it home with him. While at the same time being told not to return to the party, as flashes continue to humiliate him, calling him Penis Parker, call him Penis Parker. As such, the next day, Ned is chewing Peter out for him ditching the party when they were supposed to be having this grand reveal with Spider-Man. But that's quickly tabled when Peter shows him the weapon as Peter's in wood shop, I think. Yeah, looked like wood shop, and Peter is just kind of sort of dissecting it. And at the same time, Ned is watching this and he sees that, and he recognizes some of the tech in it. It's just some of it's actually just kind of cobbled together. Some of it is alien tech, but the rest is stuff you would find in like electric toothbrushes, chargers, etc. As such, Peter's realizing that whatever these are, someone is taking alien tech and merging it with regular arms and selling it on the black market. So there's got to be a supply for this. As such, he tries knocking it out and manages to knock out the power core for this. And so they realize that they need to find out what's going on. And so they realize that something needs to be done, so they're trying to find out where these things are coming from. But shortly after this, as Peter and Ned are leaving, Peter walks through the hall. They're walking through the halls of the school. So Peter suddenly sees that two of the people from the heist that he stopped last night appear, and he starts hiding. They're wondering why they're there, and so Peter starts tailing them. As it turns out that they actually picked up on the energy as it turns out, when Peter knocked out that energy source, they actually picked up the energy surge and are now in the school to investigate. As such, I think they managed to find the weapon, but Peter manages to stay out of their guard, and they still don't have the power source. Peter and Ned were able to keep that, Peter and Ned kept that. As such, as they're leaving, Peter is able to track them with a tracer, and so they realize they need to find out where they're going and what they're doing. Where they're going and what they're doing. And of course, something I forgot to mention is that the Shocker, as punishment for his blunder, was fired from Toombs' little job, but as a precaution, to try and add a little precaution, he threatened Toombs saying, "What if I told your wife where you're getting all that nice money?" And so Toombs decided to shoot him with a weapon that wound up disintegrating him. Though in his defense, he was trying to grab an anti-gravity weapon, and just grabbed the wrong thing. Either way, the title of Shocker is passed on to someone else, so, yeah. Whatever. So, yeah. Either way, Peter decides that he needs to take this situation into his own hands, and so he winds up Peter decides to take the situation into his own hands as he and Ned try and track where they're going, trying to track where these guys are going, and it pretty much becomes an all-nighter as both are just sitting around doing stuff. Peter is improving his tech, they're hearing all this going on, and until eventually the tracker settles near Maryland, which is not exactly close to New York, and they're wondering how the heck are we going to get out there. And so Peter realizes, until they suddenly realize, DC isn't that far from Maryland. As such, Peter tells everyone that he wants to rejoin their quiz team to go to DC, and while Flash tries I'm not saying that you think you're just going to welcome you back in, until the teacher says, yeah. It's like, oh, Peter, welcome back, come on. Come along. As such, Peter does go out there, but as on the way out, he gets a phone call from Happy, who tells him, the tracker's saying that you love New York. What's going on? He says, I'm just going to a quiz thing he's just going to a quiz thing in DC. It's to a quiz decathlon, whatever, a decathlon in DC. So it's not a big trouble. So, by the same token, however, and this is probably where I should mention something. It turns out that Happy's kind of in the middle of his own thing through his own thing. As it turns out that earlier in the film, Happy actually did call Peter back, and it turns out that the Avengers are kind of cleaning house. They're cleaning out Avengers Tower and moving all available technology and resources to the Avengers Manor upstate. Peter wasn't exactly happy to hear about this, because he thinks, well, what if you guys need me? Shouldn't I be close by? Yada yada yada. But of course, Happy is actually kind of annoyed with Peter throughout the majority of this film, because Peter just keeps bugging him, and yeah, his patience with Peter is kind of low. Is very low. Even at the beginning of the movie, he wasn't exactly happy to be playing babysitter to this 14-year-old kid with superpowers. Either way, so pretty much they managed to get to DC. And so Peter and Ned end up sharing a room, and so Ned is able to help Peter kind of hack into the suit to try and remove the tracker, because Peter doesn't want Tony or Happy following him, as he thinks that it's just them being spying on him and looking over his shoulder when need to, just kind of being a bit rebellious teen a bit. However, as they find the tracker, it turns out that Ned is able to figure out that the suit actually has a lot of other hidden functions that are being held back. Apparently, there's something going on. There's something called a training wheels program that's blocking a lot of other programs on the suit. And so when Peter hears this, he says, "I want you to take all that stuff off." But Ned thinks, I don't know. Maybe this is put on there for a reason. Maybe we shouldn't do that. Maybe we shouldn't hack it. But Peter says, "No, this is just no. I don't want. No, take them all off. I'm tired of being treated like I'm just a little kid. I'm tired of being treated like I'm just a kid." kid, I want to be able to prove myself, and I'm mentioning all this because it kind of plays into Peter's character throughout the film, and I'll get into that at the end. But with Peter's urging, Ned reluctantly takes the training wheels program off the suit. As such, Peter's through the tracker they're able to figure out where the crooks are going, where the crooks are, and so Peter pretty much and as such Peter leaves. And as such, Peter kind of sneaks out during the night. He sneaks out to do the superhero thing, not before running to Liz and the rest of the decathlon team as they're going off to the pool to sneak a swim during the night. With Liz offering Peter a chance to go with them, but Peter declining because of Spider-Man business. However, this is also where we get the introduction of Karen as Spider-Man, as it turns out that one of the features in the suit is an onboard AI. That was unlocked once Peter hacked the suit. As such, with Karen on board, Peter decides to just starts tracking where the guy. Peter goes to track where Vulture and his men are, and manages to track them down to this little stop, this little kind of off to the side rinky-dink shop, except I apologize in advance if you hear some buzzing. I put my phone on silent for this, and we may end up hearing some buzzing. I'm getting notifications, but pretty much as this thing is going on, Peter is able to overhear the conversation. He realizes they're going to be hijacking a truck soon, and so Peter tries to get into battle mode, but we get some slight hijinks as he's not used to all the new functions in the suit, and he's just kind of messing up as Karen. Just keeps enabling all this stuff, and he's very unfamiliar with all the webs and so forth. But eventually the heist goes off as a truck passes by, and Vulture comes in and uses these new tech this new tech that it's like these 4 little metal cubes that, when put on a surface and aligned properly and activated, it can allow you to phase through whatever area they're around. Like, say for example, I put them on this paper right here. Like, if I put one here like this, suddenly it would create a hole in the paper that I could slip my hand through all the way to the other side. That's pretty much what the tech they use on the truck to try and steal some of the stuff. But Spidey ends up coming in and stops the heist before they can get, and pretty much stops Vulture from taking anything away. Though in the fighting, he ends up falling through the roof, and the stuff gets knocked aside, and Peter gets stuck inside the truck. Vulture does manage to get away, but unfortunately doesn't get away with everything. He doesn't get away with anything else. And so now, as such, Peter is now stuck inside the truck, and he winds up getting knocked out as he doesn't know that that there's no longer a hole in the roof as he tries webbing out, and he instead smacks his head into the roof of the truck. As such, he wakes up later and does manage to break out, but finds that he's now stuck in the damage control vault. And unfortunately, as Karen says, they won't be able to leave until the place is opened up in the morning. So he's unfortunately stuck. But in the meantime, though, he does use the time to try and test out all the various stuff he has in his suit, including a lot of his web shooter variants. Like, there's a tase web, there's a web grenade, just a bunch of other stuff that you can use in the video game. But eventually he starts getting stir crazy as through all the time he's trying to pass, as he keeps trying to pass the time, he's learned as he's apparently gone through everything that he'd done to pass the time in the course of a half hour and 6 minutes. And so he's just saying, I gotta find a way out, and unfortunately he's kind of stuck. And he thinks, well, maybe there's something in all these something in this vault that I can use to get out. And so he looks through this old tech and manages to find one of the power cores that Vulture's men were using for their weapons, and the same thing that he and Ned have. Unfortunately, though, Karen identifies it as a Chitauri energy core, and that if it's exposed to radiation and overheated, it explodes. And so the instant Peter realizes this, he realizes, oh crap, Ned's got one of these things, I gotta go stop him. As such, Peter tries calling Ned, but unfortunately, because of how secure the damage control vault is, he can't get a signal out, and so he and Karen managed to hack the door control so that they're able to escape, and so Peter managed to hitch a ride back to DC just as the decathlon's going on. And unfortunately, Ned has kept the energy core in his backpack. As eventually the Midtown High team ends up winning the decathlon, but once it's over, they get a tour of Washington D.C. Though, and so they go to the Washington Monument, but in order to keep everything safe, they have everyone check their bags through a scan. They have to check everyone's bags, and so they go through bag check. But unfortunately, the X-ray radiation actually starts to set off the Chitauri core. After Peter is able to make it to Peter is able to make it to Washington D.C. and he tries to warn Ned, but unfortunately the phone is taken out of Ned's hands before Peter can tell him, as Liz takes the phone and says, "Where were you? Where were you? We needed you for this, but you bailed on us." And Peter keeps trying to tell Liz, "Come on, Liz, I need you to hand the phone back over to Ned. I have to tell him about something." But unfortunately, she's called through before he can do anything, and so Peter realizes he's got to get there quick. But unfortunately, he's too late. As while the Midtown High group are in an elevator, the Chitauri energy core goes off and pretty much causes the whole structure to start collapsing. As such, Karen tells Peter that the elevator's starting to go off and starting to go down, and so Peter does get there, and he's told by another decathlon alumni named Michelle. I'll talk about her later, though they don't reveal her name as Michelle till the end of the film, so I guess it's not major spoilers if you haven't seen the film yet. But Peter decides... Well, then again, if you're watching this anyway, you're getting spoiled for the film, so... Sorry. Either way, so Peter decides that he has to climb Washington Monument and get to the top floor, and after as much maneuvering, he's able to break through the glass ceiling, and he's able to break through a glass window at the top of the Washington Monument, and is able to stop the elevator, is able to save the elevator, and because he is able to grab the elevator. Though it is a kind of a process, as his elevator still keeps falling off. But Peter does manage to get it through, and does manage to web the elevator enough to lift it up so that the remaining students, because some managed to get out. In fact, it was them getting out that caused the elevator to collapse earlier than it was supposed to, and managed to get them out. But unfortunately, Liz is the last person in the elevator. Though Peter is able to web her and grab her before she's able to. Peter's able to grab her and pull her up before she can actually gets killed, a la Final Destination death. And so we managed to get her to the top floor, though before he can get a chance to actually say anything else to her, his webbing breaks and he falls down the elevator shaft. He does make it out okay. But pretty much this entire thing has marked Peter as a big time. Has pretty much gotten Peter some big time fame as all the survivors are getting interviewed by from being in the elevator shaft, how all this went down. Pretty much Peter is just getting a lot more attention as Spider-Man, which even Ned compliments Peter for. However, Peter thinks that at the same time, but now with the knowledge that the Vulture and his men are stealing from Damage Control, Peter decides he needs to do some more investigation and legwork. But this also means that he's trying to ditch school. Ned, of course, starts calling him out on this, but you can't just do that. You're already in trouble for ditching out on the decathlon. But Peter says, "I'm not going to be listen. If everything goes the way it's going to, I'm not going to be here anymore. I'm going to be off doing Avengers stuff. So I'm not even going to bother with this." And even Ned's like, "You're just going to drop out of school. That's not a good thing." But Peter's just kind of blowing that all off too, as he decides he wants to ditch school before the principal catches him and he's put into detention. Nice little tidbit here. Apparently Captain America actually made some PSA videos. Like earlier in the gym scene, we saw him. Apparently he did some things that were supposed to talk to kids about how they have to stay in fit and do stuff, and then he's going to turn it over to his friend, the gym coach. Which even the gym teacher says. Gym teacher says, "I can't. I don't know if I should really be showing these since I think he's a worker now, but hey, the state requires them, so I show him anyway." And apparently he's even got one for detention like it, but you messed up. You thought you were being cool, yada, yada, yada. It's just kind of funny. Also, Michelle's in detention, though she actually doesn't have detention. She's just there to draw people suffering. But even through all this, Peter pretty much just says, "Screw this," and leaves anyway, and the teacher doesn't really do much to stop him. I think he gets up to try and follow Peter, but we don't see him follow Peter out into the hall, so maybe he just readjusted where he was sitting. I don't know. Either way, Peter pretty much says "F this place" and goes, going back to his apartment, going back to his apartment, going back to the apartment that he made, going back to his apartment and asking Karen if they can find any leads on Vulture and his men. As such, it turns out that Karen actually has a monitor system turns out that the student has a monitor system called the baby monitor that pretty much records everything Peter does. And so Peter's able to get the security footage from the night that he was tracking Vulture's men, and he was able to figure out that and unfortunately he can't identify And so he's able to he's able to get the footage from the arms deal tonight. And while he can't get any positive ID on two of the Vulture's men, he is able to get the ID on the person they were trying to sell to, Aaron Davis. And so Peter is able to figure out where Aaron Davis is at that moment, and so he heads him off in a car garage as Aaron is hauling away groceries, and Peter tries interrogating him using this interrogation mode the suit has, but he's not intimidating even with his voice being booming. So Aaron isn't really that impressed, and so Peter realizes he's kind of screwing it up. However, Aaron actually cooperates anyway, as he does remember what Peter said about, if you want to shoot someone, shoot me, so he actually does realize that Peter is a good person, and while he may be a criminal, he doesn't want any of that big tech to get on the streets, as that stuff is stuff like that is dangerous, too dangerous. It would cause too much collateral damage, and Aaron doesn't exactly want that, especially since he has a nephew that he would like to keep safe. Which is a nice little tidbit, because in the comics, Aaron Davis' nephew is Miles Morales, the second Spider-Man. So that's a nice little wink and nod to Miles Morales. As such, while Aaron Davis says that he doesn't know where Vulture's base is, he knows exactly where he's going to be, which is the Staten Island Ferry. Which is where the next arms deal is going to go down. As such, Peter goes to Staten Island. Goes to Staten Island Ferry, and he is able to find Vulture and his men as they're in the middle of trying to get an arms deal with a criminal called Matt Gargan. As such, Peter checks in on sees what they're doing, and decides that he's got to go in there and thinks he's going to go in there and try and catch them in the act. But at the moment, he gets a call from Tony, who's just calling to congratulate him on the win in Washington, D.C., because he's trying to be a supportive role model. And trying to break the cycle of shame that his father kind of set up. However, that doesn't really go much of anywhere else, as the ferry ends up shooting off its horn, and Tony asks, what's going on? What are you doing? It's like, I'm band practice. It's like, Happy says you quit band. And so Peter eventually hangs up on him, as he goes in to try and fight with Vulture and his men, and he does do a good job taking them all down and just kind of webbing them all, and just kind of knocking them all aside. And even Vulture sees all this commotion, and I think Peter managed to get a good look at his face. And as he sees the commotion, he goes into there. The Vulture angrily gets into his van to get into his suit. However, before he can come out, it turns out the FBI's on the ferry, which even Peter's surprised by, because why are the FBI here? Why are they on this civil ferry? But before Karen can even give him an answer, Vulture comes out in his full suit and has an energy gun that he just starts blasting and shooting at everyone. Peter is able to get all the innocents out of the way, and he tries webbing up Vulture, and even manages to zap him and zap the gun and get it out of Vulture's hands. But unfortunately, the zap has caused the gun to malfunction and is now just going crazy and shooting everything. Peter tries webbing it up, but it still goes off, and the energy from it actually slices right through the ferry, causing the whole thing to just split in half. In the chaos, Vulture and some of his men manage to get away, and so Peter's priority is that he's got to keep this ship from sinking. And so he has Karen identify all the strongest points of the ship, and he just starts jumping all around, webbing everything up, trying to do everything he can to keep the ship in one piece. And it looks like he did a good job until Karen says he completed at least 98.6% of it, and he's like, wait, what? Turns out there was one structure he missed, and because of that, his webbing starts to come apart. And so he's like, no. And he just keeps jumping around trying to keep everything in place, but the ship is still coming apart until Peter just shoots one more web as he's just trying to hold the ship in place himself. And it's clearly a strain as it's hurting him until the ship starts coming together. The ship actually does start coming together. And so he's wondering what's going on. And it turns out Iron Man's there to pull his fat out of the fire and pretty much push the ship back together and eventually seal it back up. Peter starts swinging to the top and asks him, hey, do you need me for anything else? And he says, I think so. But Tony tells him, I think you've done enough. As such, Peter is able to get a lift back to the mainland as the proper authorities come in to make sure everything is okay. But once Peter is back on the ground, once everything is over, Peter and Tony end up meeting, and Tony's not happy with Peter. Because, one, he hacked the suit when he wasn't supposed to, and two, he didn't follow Tony's advice and leave well enough alone. However, Peter kind of throws that back in his face, saying that I wouldn't be here if you had listened to me. I told you something was wrong and you didn't listen to me. And if listen to me, you You didn't listen to me. None of this would have happened if you just actually heard what I said. But Peter says, if you what does it matter? If you cared, you'd actually be here. And suddenly the armor opens up, and it turns out Tony actually is there, which actually suddenly kind of deflates Peter's ego. And so Tony reveals that he was the one that alerted the FBI. He actually did listen to Peter when he said to look into everything, and he did. He did realize that and so he was able to figure everything out and figure out what Adrian was doing about the deal, and he was able to alert the feds about the deal that was going on the ferry. Pretty much meaning that Spider-Man's presence actually caused more trouble than it fixed. And Tony at this point is just not happy, and Tony is just kind of, it's just kind of like the angry parent with their child thing. Like, he keeps telling Peter, you didn't, it's like, everyone told me it was nuts for putting my faith in a 14-year-old kid, but I did anyway, and like, what if everything went wrong? People could have died there. What if you died, and I would have had that on my conscience? And he finally just tells Peter, you know what, this isn't working out, I'm gonna need the suit back. And Peter just like, no, you can't take the suit, I'm nothing without it. Which Tony responds with, responds with like a really good line that I wrote down here. If you're nothing without the suit, then you shouldn't have it. And it's a really good scene, and it kind of makes Peter realize that he effed up bad. As such, after supplying Peter with a I survived a trip to New York shirt and some clothes, Peter goes back to the apartment with Aunt May, now shirtless, and it turns out Aunt May as well. And yeah, Aunt May has also been trying to call him because she learned about how he ditched attention, and she even says, "I'm aware. I know you've been sneaking out, and she wants to know exactly what's going on with him." But all Peter tells her is that he's lost the internship, which does kind of get a nice little comfort moment between them as Peter. And she asks, well, what happened? It's like, I tried too hard to impress them, and I just screwed up. And so, yeah, it does kind of make Peter feel more down. But after this, because of this, though, Peter actually starts dedicating more time to being Peter. Hanging out with Ned, going back to classes, being in attention, etc., and at one point even talking with Liz Allen. Liz Allen, as he gets a hall pass to go to the bathroom, I think. But, of course, so as he's talking with he does talk with Liz, and Liz does know that she has had a crush on him. He's not exactly subtle about it. But it turns out, and something that they've been building up throughout the film is that Homecoming is coming up. And so Peter decides he wants to talk, and so Peter does actually work up the nerve to ask Liz to go to Homecoming with him. And she says yes, and Peter's just overjoyed by this, and so when he gets home that night, he gets Aunt May's help with getting a suit ready, learning how to tie a tie, getting a corsage, and Aunt May dropping off at Liz's house to pick them up. However, once Peter gets to the front door, it turns out that Liz's father is Adrian Toomes. And the instant Peter sees him, it just kind of, you can just kind of see that how tense everything has just suddenly gotten. And what's even scarier is that Adrian Toomes is just acting like a typical dad right now. He's giving Peter the biz. He's intentionally forgetting his name. He's doing all this. He's doing all the things that a father would do to his daughter's date when that any other father would do if their daughter brought a boy home. Like, he's not being a jerk, but he is getting Peter. He is hassling Peter, even giving him tests like, "Hey, should I get you anything? Bourbon, liquor?" And Peter says, "I'm not allowed drinks." Like, that's the right answer. And he's just gauging Peter, but Peter is just freaking out to the point where when he's going to give Liz Allen the corsage, instead of just giving it to her romantically, he just hands it to her while keeping his eye on Toombs. As such, it gets even more tense as Toombs says he's going to be their escort to Homecoming, but on the way there, a conversation gets talked about as he asks Peter what his aspirations for the future are, and Liz says that he apparently has a Stark internship, which Peter says he quit. And so, because Toombs blames Tony for all this, because he's the one that set up damage control. So once again, another villain that was been inspired by Stark. And so he starts actually and so he hears about how Peter was friend, and so he kind of hears about how Peter knows Spider-Man, and But then it's the conversation shifts like the party, and so she said, and so he says it was a nice party there. It's like, oh come on, you're only there for like 2 seconds. And so when Adrian hears that, he kind of starts to realize that Peter left around the same time that his guys are being hassled by Spider-Man. By that same token, he does start asking, and so on that same note, he starts asking about Washington, D.C., about how terrified he was about being in the elevator, and says, actually, I wasn't in the elevator, I was on the ground while Spider-Man took care of everything. And you can pretty much see the wheels turning in Adrian's head as he's able to finally actually put 2 and 2 together, and realizes that Peter Parker is Spider-Man, and it is just creepy as hell. As such, they get to the school, and he tells Liz to go in while he gives Peter the dad talk. And he pretty much just... and so he asks Peter, does she know? And Peter says, no what? And he's like, oh, she doesn't. Good. Good. You play it close to the belt. You play it close to the chest. I like that. But he pretty much makes it clear to Peter that on no uncertain terms that to not screw with him. Because he's willing to do whatever... because he's willing to do whatever it takes to protect his family. Because that's actually part of the reason why he's doing this in the first place. His family. Because, again, when Damage Control came in and took over the jobs, he realized that if he wanted to support his family, he would need to adapt to this world. And unfortunately, part of that is that he's willing... because part of the thing they had with Adrian, with Vulture, is that he's got morals. He does have his own moral code, which he even applies to Peter. It's actually part of the reason why he likes him, as he realizes that Peter's kind of... as he does admit he likes Peter and does kind of respect him. But he does make it clear under no uncertain terms that if Peter crosses him, he's going to kill him. As such, he tells Peter to go in and give Liz a good time. And so Peter goes in there just obviously shaken up. And so he goes in just trying to comprehend this news. And so he goes up to Liz and says, I'm sorry, I have to go. You don't deserve this. As such, he calls Ned and alerts him that Liz's dad is the Vulture. And says so he has to go after them. And so Peter manages to get his old suit, because before Tony gave him his suit, he used like a mask with these goggles. He used the mask with the goggles and all that, and a jumpsuit, and a red sweatshirt and with red and blue clothes. And so he manages to get that as he tries to get his web shooters on to go after Adrian, but he's headed off by the new Shocker. Who's managed to get a hand of the Shocker glove. And it just starts beating Peter senseless. And Peter, unfortunately, isn't able to get a good hand on this because he wasn't able to get his web shooters on before doing this. And I'm guessing that Adrian called this guy after he left, saying if he runs out in his Spidey jammies, kill him. And so as such, Peter is just kind of getting screwed over by Shocker as it looks like he's about to kill him. Until Peter is saved at the last minute by Ned, who managed to grab the web shooter and webs the Shocker's glove, and it gives Peter enough time to knock him down and knock him down, grab the web shooter Ned, and web him to the side of a bus. As such, Peter realizes that he needs to go after Toombs, and so he gets Ned to go into the school, and he tells him he wants him to go and track his phone because he intentionally left his phone in the car that Adrian was driving. As it turns, because before he left, Adrian said that he had to go out on a flight for work, but this is the last one. And I'll talk about this and I'll talk about this in a minute. And so Ned goes to the computer lab and is able to try and track Peter's phone, and is able to use the computers to try and track Peter's phone. While in the meantime, Peter, trying to get there quickly, manages to head off Flash Thompson as he's trying to impress his date by intimidating Flash Thompson into giving him his car, and just drives off with it. And no, that car is not spared. It's total. It's everything. It's almost total, and it's actually it's sickeningly hilarious. I love it. And it means, but anyway, with that in mind, oh yeah. But anyway, Peter is able to track Toombs down to the shipyard, and pretty much what's going on is that Toombs is planning one final job, as it were. And as I mentioned earlier, Happy mentioned that they were moving a bunch of Avengers tech upstate because that's where the Avengers are moving. But and so when Peter hears about the big job, he realizes that what they're planning to do is to heist the plane. Now, originally, Adrian was not planning to do this because he thought this was too risky. Like, he had his tech guy even giving this atmosphere-proof whatever's for his suit to have him fly to high altitudes, but he kept knocking it down. However, thanks to Spider-Man's continued interventions, like he stopped because Spider-Man stopped him from stealing the tech stopped him from stealing the tech earlier from damage control, and he wound up screwing up, and he even wound up screwing up the arms deal on the Staten Island ferry. Pretty much at this point they need this job. They pretty much need this tech they set up for they need this tech just to get the big score. So yeah, at this point, he's willing to do whatever it takes. As such, Peter confronts Adrian in his lab, and so Adrian does pretty much because this is where he states he likes Peter because he sticks to his ideals. He's strong. He's a good kid. And Peter just starts going, how could you do this to Liz? And he says, I'm doing this for her, and he says the people like Tony Stark and the people up there, they don't care about us. We're just the little guys. They look down on us and we just get their table scraps. And the only way if we want to get better, we have to fight for it ourselves. And hence why he has the suit. And in a way, it is sort of understandable because he is doing everything he can for his family. At the end of the day, he's doing bad things. Because he's selling technology, but he's just trying to make his way. He's trying to make his way by adapting in a world that doesn't need people like him anymore. And unfortunately, that means getting down and dirty and doing some bad things that he normally wouldn't do. But at the same time, he's willing to cross that moral line if just for the sake of his family, just for the sake of giving his family a good life. As such, Peter's like, well, why are you telling me all this? And it's like, well, for one, I want to try to make you understand. Two, I just need to buy some time. As it turns out, through this entire conversation, he actually called his flight suit in, and he has it fly around the entire warehouse as Peter just keeps dodging it. And eventually, Peter keeps saying, and Adrian thinks Peter just thinks that this is all a joke because the thing hasn't even touched him. Only it turns out it took out a large portions of all the support beams around this building, and so he has the glider fly through all the beams and cause the roof of the building to just come crushing down on Peter, while Adrian gets inside and flies off to get ready for the heist. As such, Peter is now crushed under the rubble, and this is kind of where we get to, I think, the best scene in this whole movie. This is the classic scene in the comics. Spider-Man crushed under so much rubble, and it looks like there's no way out. And the scene has been repeated and shown ad nauseum in various other mediums, so seeing in the MCU I think is a really good pleasure, and especially with the context, as this is the moment that kind of hits Peter just how right Tony was here, because as he's underneath, he tries to move the rubble but finds that he can't do it, and then he starts crying. Like, he just starts weeping, and his voice starts getting shaky. He's like, help, someone help, I'm stuck in here, help! As he just kind of realizes he was in over his head. It's like in this single moment he realizes that he does realize he wasn't the big-time superhero. He's just a kid just trying to prove himself here, as he just feels like he's afraid, scared, and so as he feels like he's now being crushed with no one there to help him. By the same token, the scene is also where he gets the strength of will to actually realize that this is the scene where he kind of realizes that he needs to rely on himself, so to speak. Like, a trend in this film, like, I'm going to address something that I've heard about. Like, I'm going to take this time to address something that I've heard people describe about this film from certain other critics. About how this film is like the superhero equivalent of Seinfeld. It's a movie about nothing. To which I respond with, no, it isn't. A constant thing that, like, as I've said before throughout this film, Peter's big character journey is that he's trying to convince Tony Stark, Iron Man, that he deserves to be an Avenger. Like, he wants to be treated like an adult. Like he's a real big-time superhero. Like, he doesn't want to be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He wants to be in the big leagues with other Avengers. He wants to be out on missions, saving lives, doing all the things that Avengers and superheroes do. But by that same but people keep telling him, no, you're not ready. And like a typical rebellious teen, he instead says, no, I am ready, and I'm going to prove it to you. To the point where he actually doesn't listen to everybody when they're telling him, when he doesn't listen to anybody when they try to give him warnings that this is not a good idea. It's at this moment, it's how, but, and this ultimately is exemplified with Tony's line to Peter when he screws up on the Staten Island ferry. If you need, again, going back to this, if you're nothing without the suit, then you shouldn't have it. And that's exactly kind of what Peter was doing. He didn't deserve the suit. He was being childish. He was only thinking about himself throughout the whole movie. He wasn't like, he may be doing this for he may be Spider-Man for good reasons. Like, again, great power, great responsibility. If I don't do this, someone could get hurt and it would be my fault. It is altruistic reasons, but throughout the whole film, he's been more concerned. He seems to have forgotten that. He's more concerned with making himself look good by taking down the big bad guy. And he's been relying on the strength of others to build himself up. He's been wanting this affirmation from Tony to telling him that you are a superhero. You do deserve to be in the big leagues. He's been looking through that the whole movie, and the more he's been denied that by Tony, the more Tony's told him, you need to just step aside and let the big boys handle this. You just need to start small. The more he said, no, I want to go big. Even though the only reason he's been able to even reach that length is because of the suit. And the fact that he relied on it so heavily to the point, it made him start getting it. It's made him more arrogant. It made him hurt people. It made him not hurt people, but make mistakes. All because he prioritized making himself look good over what's the better thing to do in this situation. Like, again, the ferry scene is probably the best example. He ditches school because he thinks, if I take these guys down, I'll look good to Mr. Stark. He goes in, he cuts off Tony and goes in without a plan. And then when things go, and he hacks a suit that intentionally had a program in it that was blocking all the higher functions, because Tony knew that if he had to get those things, he had to build up to it. He needed training. He couldn't just give him all the higher stuff. He couldn't just give all this stuff to a 14-year-old. That'd be stupid. But Peter has constantly been trying to build himself up, and he's used Tony. He's wanted to try and have Tony be that springboard. He just wanted Tony. It's like a rebellious teen with their father. At the end of it's just Peter trying to prove himself, but unfortunately that drive has gotten in the way of being a hero, of being Spider-Man. It got to the point where he wasn't being a hero. He was just being an angry kid, just waving his hands in the air saying, "Look at me, I'm important, I'm important." And so when Tony finally takes away the suit, it does give him a chance to be Peter again. Go back to his life. As now that he thinks he's out of his favor, he thinks there's no pressure. But this in turn is what helps drive his battle with Toombs. When he learns that Adrian is the bad guy he's been going after, he doesn't hesitate to go after him. He gets the suit on and everything, only to have this scene where he is in over his head. He realizes and this is where he finally said, and this is where the words and this is where he remembers Tony's line, "If you're nothing without the suit, then you shouldn't have it." And it finally makes him realize he shouldn't. And it finally makes him realize that he doesn't need Tony's approval. And that Tony, in a way, was right. If he wants to be that hero, he needs to work up to it. And he shouldn't be having Tony Stark be the one that puts him up on that pedestal. If he wants to be a hero, he needs to do the right thing. He needs to stand up strong. He needs to stand up by his own ideals. He needs to grow up. And that's pretty much what the film is about. It's about Peter growing up. It's about Peter having to realize he is a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and there's nothing wrong with that. He's a good kid. He does good things. He helps other people. The fact that he's even here now, when all he's wearing is a sweatshirt and a red ski mask and goggles, shows that he is a good kid. And even though he's woefully unprepared, he wants to help others. Like, and this manages to give him this new strength of morals gives him enough will to try and power us through getting crushed under the rubble and get out. And that's why I think this is the best scene in the film. Because it's Peter realizing his faults, coming to terms with them, and realizing, I need to make myself worth this. I can't have Tony Stark be the one that gets me that helps me get up higher. I need to be the one to do that. But if I want to do that, I need to earn that. And how he earns that is not by going out and catching big time super criminals. It's by just being a hero. And so, with this newfound resolve, Peter is able to escape, and he manages to catch Vulture before he flies off into the jet. Vulture doesn't notice as Peter webs to the back of his suit and is trailing behind him as they fly up to the jet as Happy manages to get all the tech onto it and tries to transport it upstate. However, this doesn't actually end with. However, Vulture does manage to get in, and so Vulture does manage to get in, even creating a drone with the coordinates of the ship's prominent flight signature, so that people tracking it would think that the drone is a ship, while Toombs flies the ship off so that they can steal all the tech. Even having his wings act as a vacuum seal around the hole he made so they can get in. But Peter manages to dislodge it enough so that it starts causing cabin pressure. As such, the Vulture realizes that Spider-Man's still alive and goes out and they start fighting, and eventually, as they're fighting, they start getting to the turbines, and Vulture's wings end up getting stuck in the turbines, causing one to catch fire, and Peter ends up webbing up the other so that he doesn't get chopped up to bits. But that in turn causes it to fall out, and the fight just keeps going on and on and on, and just little by little the plane is being destroyed. To the point where Happy watches out as he sees that because the ship is camouflaged, the plane is camouflaged, and so it starts kind of falling, and eventually it falls out of the sky, and Peter is able to redirect it enough by webbing up the wings and directing its flight path so that it eventually lands on a beach near a carnival, near a beachside by a carnival. However, by some miracle, he and Vulture are still alive. But Vulture is pretty much just pissed, and it leads to just one last fight between them as Vulture is now just pissed off and ready to, and just wants Spidey dead, and Peter is just exhausted and is just trying to stay alive. But in the battle, ultimately looks like it's going in Vulture's favor until he sees a case full of all these miniature arc reactors. As such, he prioritizes that over Spider-Man and tries flying away, but Peter sees that his flight suit is damaged and is about to explode. As such, he tries to get him down, but Vulture cuts the web. And Spidey tries doing it again, but he finds that he's out of web fluid. And unfortunately, Vulture's suit does explode, and he crashes. Peter then manages to go into the wreckage and finds Toombs and finds Vulture underneath everything, underneath all the wreckage. And he does manage to pull him aside, and both are just pretty much exhausted. But Peter does manage to get the strength as when Happy and the rest of the damage control come to check out the wreckage. They find all the tech, they find all the stuff that the plane was carrying, all nice and tidy in one pile. And webbed up to the pile is Adrian with a little note attached about all their stuff being there. As such, the next day, Peter's back at school, still trying to recuperate from everything. But as he's going off, he sees Liz and her mom He sees Liz talking to one of her friends, and things aren't looking well. And so Peter goes to talk to Liz, and just tells her he's sorry because after this event, her dad is pretty much just been arrested and is now in prison. And so Liz isn't exactly happy with Peter about him ditching her on the prom, but she, at the same time, is still not in a good place, and Peter's trying to console her and tell her, look, if there's anything you need, just tell me. And Liz ultimately just says, look, whatever's going on with you, I hope you can work through it. And she then tells them that she and her mom are now moving to Oregon, as they need to get away from all this, and even then, her dad doesn't want her there when the trial eventually goes down. As such, she pretty much just says her goodbye to Peter and leaves with her mom, and And so Peter realizes that things are just, and so Peter is now at the next meeting of the decathlon. No, sorry, the decathlon was the competition. I'm sorry, I don't remember their name. Either way, he meets up with the rest of the students, and they say they need a new team captain, and they ultimately elect Michelle, who has just been kind of popping and so they ask, and so they said, oh yeah, and so they ask, well, actually, you guys can my friends call me MJ, so yeah, she's actually meant to be Mary Jane. I admit I do kind of like the build-up. If you hadn't heard anything, it probably is a nice little payoff. So you know that she and Peter are eventually going to get together. But before they can continue on, Peter gets a text to meet with Happy in the bathroom. As such, Peter goes to meet with them, and Happy tries to thank Peter for what he did, because he does need this job. He does need this job. He doesn't know what he would do, though he gets awkwardly interrupted by a kid who was using a stall. And so Happy tells Peter that he's going to go take him to see Tony. And Peter says, wait, is he in the bathroom? He's like, no, he's in upstate, come on. And so Happy takes Peter to the Avengers Manor upstate. As such, Tony comes in to talk with Peter, and he is just kind of patting Peter on the back, saying, look, yeah, you screwed up bad. But you know what? I think taking away the suit was the nice kick in the pants that you needed. Because you pulled your fat out of the fire, you saved the day, you helped all those people. I think it was a good, and I think with proper training, you'd be a valuable asset to the team. And Peter's like, wait, what? And it turns out that, yeah, that's why he brought him here. He says, okay, you can be an Avenger. Even opening up this little, even showing him that he's made him a new suit. This being the Iron Spider suit, this being the MCU variant of the Iron Spider suit. And so he tells Peter that behind a nearby door, there's a bunch of reporters, real ones, not vloggers or bloggers or whatever. And that after he gets the suit on, he can unveil himself as a new Avenger, and Happy will direct him to his room. And while Peter does look excited about this, after seeing this, he does start to kind of calm down a bit and says, actually, you know what? I think I'm just going to be small. And again, this shows Peter's progress. As, again, he realizes he does need to start small. He realizes that he needs to build himself up. If he's going to be an Avenger, he has to just earn it. He can't just do something like, he can't just jump into it. He realizes, yeah, he is woefully unprepared. He is just a kid from Queens who, if he wants to be a hero, he does need to kind of work up to it. He's still young, he's still learning, and so now that he's at the point where he does get that approval he's been longing for throughout the whole film, it's kind of at a point, it's, as you do, he's at a point where he doesn't think he needs it. As such, he declines, which even Happy and Tony are actually surprised by. He says, I think I should start small, be a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. He's like, okay. He's like, look at the suit and look at me. Yes or no, one-time offer. You want to be Avenger? He's like, no. It's like, okay then. And so Happy tells him to go away in the car, and Peter's like, this is a test, right? It's like, yeah, it was a test. Yeah, it was a test. You passed. And Peter's let's just go on until the door of the press room opens up, and Pepper shows up. It turns out that Pepper and Tony are now no longer on their break, as she asks, well, where's the kid? And Tony tries covering his ass again. It's like, he made actually a really good decision. Both of us were really surprised, but it was really nice. It's like, you scared him off, didn't you? Happy told him away in the car. It's like, you told him away in the car? I got a bunch of reporters back here. What are we going to tell them? They're expecting big news. And so Tony says, Happy, you still got that ring. And so Happy says he's been keeping this ring since 2008, which Pepper and Tony are actually a little creeped out about. But either way, he throws it at Tony as he and Pepper are going into the conference room, and yeah, as we learn in a later film, Tony proposed in this scene. But anyway, with Peter, he does get his ride back to his apartment, and when he gets there, he calls out Aunt May, wondering what's going on, I'm wondering where she is, but he doesn't find her. But when he gets to his room, he finds a bag in there that says, I think this belongs to you, signed Tony. And inside the bag is the Spidey suit that Tony made for him, which Peter immediately puts on, is admiring himself, and takes off the mask, only for the film to end with Aunt May at the door seeing Peter in the suit and yelling "What the?" before it eventually cuts to the credits. However, of course, since it's a Marvel film, we still got our after credit scenes. One of which is actually another PSA Captain America vid that pretty much just makes fun of every single Marvel viewer that waits till after the credits for these scenes. But the other ultimately follows Adrian as he's in prison, only to run to Matt Gargan, who also got here. And ever since, hold on, Xander. And ever since the encounter with Spidey on the ferry, he's been scarred. But he's approaching Toombs, saying that, listen, I don't blame you. I blame that webhead. And I got some folks on the outside who love to meet him, cut his throat, and then stick his head in a dryer. And there's a rumor going around that you know who he is. And so Adrian, but all Vulture has to say is, if I knew who he is, do you think he'd be dead? Don't you think he'd be dead right now? If you excuse me, I'm going to go see my family. And yeah, it's possible hinting that there was going to be something bigger later on, which I think it would have been cool, but as with recent events, we might not get a payoff for that in the MCU. So, hold on a second. Sorry about that. Had some business to attend to with my dog. Anyway, so we got the plot summary out of the way. What do I think of this movie? It's still a lot of fun. Like, it's definitely a good... Like, this is a film that I think I think Spider-Man kind of needed for a little while. Like, this is a film that I think captures Spider-Man perfectly. Like, the Raimi trilogy, I will still give kudos. It's still the films that introduced me to the webhead, but this film, I think, helps exemplify, actually, Spider-Man in a more positive light. Like, for one thing, the Spider-Man we're seeing here actually is a teenager. He's dumb. He makes mistakes. He does stupid things. He tries being popular. He deals with the teen problems. He is more hormonal. He does actually do all this stuff. But because of this, it kind of helps show his struggle and just kind of the coming of age of the film is trying to build up. And when he's Spider-Man, it's done perfectly. It's exactly what you would expect out of Spider-Man. He's quipping. He's web slinging. He's doing all this wacky tacky crap that you would expect Spider-Man to do. He's throwing one-liners all around. I think my favorite scene with that is when he goes to stop the bank robbers that are dressed like the event that are wearing the Halloween Avengers masks, and they just see it, and they see this, and he's like, "Oh, it's the Avengers!" Like, "Oh, Cap, it's nice to meet you, huh?" Oh, and then even when the fight turns against his favor, when they pull out when the alien attack, it's like, oh, I'm starting to think that you guys aren't the Avengers. It's just he does capture Spider-Man and his attitude. And it's really well, and it's done actually really nicely. And it's so fun to watch him actually web slinging and doing all the awesome stuff in the movie as Spider-Man. Like seeing him like earlier in the film, as he's just running around doing neighborhood stuff. That's Spider-Man. That's exactly what you'd expect. That actually is just kind of nice and quaint. That is actually kind of nice, quaint, and just all around, and just superhero-y. Sorry, hold on a sec. Sorry, but deal with this little monster. Anyways, I was saying, what was I talking about? Spider-Man doing all this. And again, I think the emotional heart of the film is just kind of Peter's journey. Because again, he is just kind of thinking of this whole Avengers thing as like a kid who's just been... It's like a kid who was invited to play with the big boys for a little while. It's like a little kid who was invited to play with the big boys. He's building it up and he's talking about, oh man, this is cool. But then once it's over, he's like, so when are we gonna do that again? And they're just like, you will work up to it. It's just, and it's just kind of, and throughout the whole film, he's just constantly trying to prove himself to Tony, again, through the wrong means. But then eventually, and then when he screws up so badly that he loses the suit, like Tony said, it is sort of the kick in the pants that he needs to improve himself. As he goes out with just kind of the bare minimum, goes out to face the Vulture, and it makes him realize that he is woefully underprepared. He does need to start out small and just be a hero. That he needs to just he just needs to help out where he can and think about what's the best way to help people rather than what's the best way to make myself look good here. Which again helps with the ending of the film, where he ultimately where when Tony tells him you can be that we want you to be an Avenger, and he just says, I think I need to build up to that. Which I like that. Again, it's nice, and I think that's again what the emotional heart of the film is. It's just Peter learning to grow up, learn that he doesn't need that approval. He doesn't need that he shouldn't just go out and try and get the approval. He needs to work up to it and earn it. And that he probably should start small. He's 14. He's 14, and this is the Marvel universe. And this is a universe where I think they've gotten invaded twice, at least, where a robot came to life and almost killed everybody on the planet, where superheroes have gone to war, where there are magical monstrosities. Yeah, there's a lot to take in, and Peter is still just 14 and just kind of grasping at all this strange stuff. So, he is kind of in over his head, but at the same time, the same time, he's not turning away from it either. He is willing to face all this head on, and he is willing to learn. So hence why he's actually ready to start small. And on top of that, I like the relationship between Peter and Tony. I know people have criticized these movies for saying that they're making Spider-Man into like Iron Man 2, but I think that I do like the relationship that Peter and Tony share in this movie. It is sort of like a father-son mentality. Tony tries to be there for Peter when Peter is doing the right thing, and while he does chew Peter out, he is also there to help him. Like when Peter first fought the Vulture and almost got drowned. While Tony wasn't physically there, he sent the suit out to go save him, and then told him, "Don't get involved in this." And he didn't do that because he wanted to knock Peter down. He did it because he thought that Peter was woefully unprepared to fight the Vulture, which Peter kind of was. But at the same time, he did listen to Peter. He did look into it and looked into what Peter discovered. And so hence why he had the FBI. But when Peter went in and still screwed things up because he thought Tony was intentionally ignoring him, he rightfully chewed Peter out because Peter's actions that day almost did get a lot of people killed. And so just the way he talks to Peter, it's a mix. It is obviously that it's the tone that says, "I'm not angry, but I am disappointed." Which is the mom way of saying I'm pissed. I'm royally pissed at you. And he does want to be there for Peter, to the point where part of the reason he took the suit away was because he didn't want Peter jumping into a situation that he was woefully unprepared for and possibly getting killed. That's part of the reason why he did it, because he does care about Peter's well-being, and he doesn't want he doesn't want this to happen, because he doesn't want this to happen, to have an innocent person's have an innocent kid put his life on the line just because Tony put his faith in him at the wrong place and wrong time. That's ultimately, and the ending again is just a nice little thing too, because he finally does think that because he finally does give Peter what he wants, though he thinks that because Peter did take down the big bad, though again, but in order to do that, Peter had to realize his own strength and realize what he could and couldn't do. And so when Peter says, "I think I probably shouldn't be an Avenger," it makes sense. I like that. Makes sense. I do actually like that. It is just, again, showing how Peter realizes that he probably shouldn't be jumping in head. He probably shouldn't be jumping in head first. He probably should actually try to work through these things. He probably should work through these things, which again I like. And again, we do get some more plot stuff with Tony. Again, having Peter's life in his hands, possible foreshadowing, and even the reveal that Tony's planning to propose to Pepper, which is nice. I like that. I like that a lot. It's just cute. It's cute. And as for the rest of the cast, I think it's all really well done. I think it's all well done and really nice. I love the interactions of the characters, and I do admit I am okay. And again, I am okay with some of the changes that they made to the characters. Like I said, Flash Thompson is still King Douche the Third. I admit he fits Flash Thompson. Even if you're familiar with the typical archetype for Flash Thompson, all you have to do is see the first scene where he drives in his expensive Ferrari, calls Peter Penis Parker, and you just look at that and think, that's Flash Thompson, ain't it? And yeah, it fits. And it's not the typical bully archetype that Flash Thompson usually goes into, but it's still Flash. He's a dick to Peter throughout the whole film for no reason. He keeps propping himself up even though he hasn't really done anything. When he wins the decathlon, when the Midtown High team wins the decathlon, he prioritizes the stinking trophy they get over their lives. It's actually really conceited, and it's actually kind of funny. And again, on top of that, I also like Ned. He's a lot of fun, acts as more of a comic relief, especially when he learns about what happened to Peter, but at the same time, he is supportive and wants to help him, and as he says, he wants to be the guy in the chair, and he actually does become a good help. And it's nice, and it actually helps him. There is a nice little funny scene where, when he's helping, and there's actually a funny scene where he's helping Peter to track his phone so he can go after Vulture, and so after he gets Peter to there, he gets caught by a teacher saying, "Hey, there's a dance out there, what are you doing in here?" And so to try and cover his ass is like, "Oh, I was looking at porn." Which, Again, I'm sorry, it's so mature, but that is hilarious. He had to use that as the excuse. It's just, it's so stupid, but I love it. On top, and then of course, I like Michelle. I like Michelle. Like we're so used to seeing the MJ. Like when we hear about MJ, we usually think red hair, and so we usually think the gorgeous redhead, and who's just kind of the typical girl that seems like out of Peter's league, but does like him. But Michelle, it does not actually sit there, that typical trope. Throughout the whole film, she just kind of there, being kind of a little shit, but in an endearing way, if that makes any sense. Like, the first time we see her, we see Ned and Peter ogling Liz as she's putting up a banner for homecoming. But then she says, "You guys are losers." And she's like, "Well, if we're losers, why are you hanging out with us?" "Because I don't have any friends." Like, she keeps making fun of everybody for what they're doing, yet she constantly takes part. Like, they ask her why she's at the decathlon. She has nothing better to do. She says she wants to protest things. Like, she protest things that we don't ever see her protesting. She just always has a snide comment or remark to make, and it's just funny. And it's a good way of building her up. And she's there in the background, so you just kind of think of her as like a funny little character. Hell, when Peter goes to the homecoming and he's still dealing with the trauma that Liz Allen's dad is the bad guy he's been going after this whole movie, the first thing she did when she sees Peter is just give him double middle fingers. It's hilarious. Admittedly, slight mood whiplash there, but that's actually kind of funny. So the reveal that she's actually this continuity's MJ, I think is nice. Especially, I think it's nice because it really does kind of come out of nowhere, and you think, wait, that's MJ? And so you immediately realize that that next movie is mostly going to focus on Peter and MJ growing closer. And I like that. I like that. It's nice and sweet. And again, I do like the finale. And again, I still strongly argue with the statement that says, "Oh, this film is the superhero equivalent of Seinfeld." No, it isn't. It's a film about a kid growing up. It's about a kid having to come to terms with, yeah, he is a kid and over his head, but that's not a bad thing. It means that there's room for growth. It means he can learn. It means he can get better. It means he can actually grow, and the first thing that he has to do, and the first place he has to start, is just by being a hero. Not trying to prove himself to anybody. He just needs to be a good person. A hero. And as I've ranted on before, a hero is someone that's supposed to just help out and do the right thing. And yeah, Peter has that. As throughout the film, he does do that. Part of Aaron Davis gives him the information he needs, not because Peter intimidated him, but because Peter said, "If you're going to shoot anyone, shoot me," just so that Vulture's goons didn't end up going after him. When at the end, when he fought the bank robbers and the sandwich shop that he frequented was attacked, he immediately ran in and helped and saved the owner and his cat. That is that is the stuff that Peter, while Peter was doing that, while he did think it was small potatoes, that's something that should be where he starts. He does need to start small. He does need to be that friendly neighborhood Spider-Man. But at the same time, he can't just ignore these things either. He can't just ignore these things either, but he has to be sure what he can handle and what's the best way to handle it. Because like we saw, Tony did handle it well. He did listen to Peter's demands and he knew about Peter's capabilities and he knew what Peter could and couldn't do, and so told him, "Stay away from this. You're not good. You probably can't take this." And he didn't say that to undermine Spider-Man. It was just a statement of fact. And he listened to him. But again, Peter's headstrongness got the best of him, and he rushed in and just made things worse. The whole film is that nice little coming of age, as Peter has to realize that if he wants to be a good superhero, he first needs to be a good hero. And that's just a nice little thing, to the point in which, again, it helps exemplify why he doesn't want to be an Avenger at the end. Because he doesn't need that big status. Not yet, at least. So for now, he is just a friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, and I appreciate that. And I guess another thing I like, too, is the Vulture. Like, prior to the reveal that he was Liz Allen's dad, he did kind of fit into a standard typical supervillain thing. Into standard typical supervillain fare. Like, he wasn't awful. Like, he was because Michael Keaton does deliver a great performance as Adrian Toomes. And he does give him a powerhouse performance, as he actually does come across as a man who's trying to do a job, do it well, but unfortunately he does deal with complications. He does have some funny lines here and there, like when he winds up killing the first Shocker, he's like, I thought this is the anti-gravity gun. Like, no, that one's over there. No, that one's over there. It's getting work done. Work done. But the reveal of the reveal that he's Liz Allen's dad, I think is perfect, and it adds another layer to his character. As we see, because when at home, he's a typical dad. He treats Liz Allen like how a dad typically treats his daughter. He treats Peter like he would treat his daughter's date. But at the same time, he's not stupid, and he's able to and with all the context clues, he's able to deduce that Peter Parker and Spider-Man are the same person. But he doesn't get. But he still lets it slide because 1, Peter is on a date with his daughter. 2, Peter saved his life, and 3, now that he's actually got him where he wants him, he tells him, "Stay away out of my business." But even when Peter doesn't heed that warning and goes after him anyway, he still respects the kid because Peter's got a good head on his shoulders, and his reasoning isn't that bad, and his reasoning is somewhat understandable. Like, again, he's the bad guy, and he's selling illegal weapons to monsters on the street for his own profit. So yeah, he's hurting people so he's hurting people, whether it's intentional or unintentional. Until he has tried to kill Peter for getting in his way, but it is understandable. He is just trying to adapt in a world that he thinks won't need him anymore, and so he thinks the best way that he can adapt is to just kind of become something else. And unfortunately he's willing to bend his morals a bit just to get that, which is why he's willing to kill Peter if Peter gets in his way, because in his mind it's justified. He's trying to help his family, and while he does respect Peter for sticking to his guns and trying to do the right thing, he knows that Peter has to be dealt with if he wants to succeed. Which, it does make it understandable. Hell, I even like at the ending scene where he encounters Mac Gargan in prison, and when Mac tries and rather than tell Mac, oh yeah, Spider-Man's Peter Parker, he pretty much just plays dumb and's like, no, I don't know who he is. If I did, I would have killed him already. Which, again, just shows that he does respect him, or at the very least doesn't want to share him. I don't know. But either way, I like that. It's not great, but it is nice, and he does have layers, so I will give credit to Michael Keaton as the Vulture in this film. He's nice. So, I don't know what else to say. I think the story is nice. It's a nice little coming-of-age thing where it's a nice little coming-of-age story about Peter having to accept his limitations and if he wants to be the hero, he has to kind of start small. It also deals with a familiar relationship with Tony. It builds up stuff for later films, like such as with that stuff in the prison, though whether that actually becomes a part of the Marvel Cinematic Universe or not, we don't know. Or at the very least, it may not actually come to fruition in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. But again, I'm gonna say, I'll save that for another video. But all at the same time, it also sets up what's up with Tony. Sets up stuff between him and Pepper. And also, at the end, I love the reveal of that. Also love the reveal. Also love the reveal with Aunt May. That was hilarious. But again, I like the characters. I like the acting. I think it's all really fantastic. I love the progression. I love the action. I love the characterization. And I guess the only thing that holds this film back is, ironically, the tone it was going for. It does feel more down to earth, so to speak. So it feels more mundane, which I think is both a good thing and a bad thing. On the one hand, Peter is supposed to be like the everyman, so seeing this typical high school kid in a regular setting like this is just sort of something you would expect. It does ultimately show that he's more of an everyday person, but it ultimately shows he is kind of more of an everyday person, and that's something that we can relate to. But at that same token, it's still a 14-year-old kid who's doing kind of the stupid stuff. And yeah, that does kind of hinder it a little, especially since he does capture the 14-year-old mentality rather well, which is both a good thing and a bad thing for the sake of the movie. So it does suffer because of this. It does suffer some minor plot hiccups as the plot kind of gets directed away as we focus on Peter's day-to-day life, which again, both a good thing and a bad thing, I suppose. And again, before the Vulture reveal, he does kind of fit into that standard villain fare. But again, the rest of the film, I think, is more than makes up for it. It's got some good laughs. It's got good action, great characters, great build-up, great plot, a nice plot. Overall, Spider-Man: Homecoming, I think, is a really fun movie. So, yeah, that's all I have to say. So, thank you for watching. I'm Samuel Johnson, and tune in next week as we go to see what the God of Thunder has been doing this whole time with Thor Ragnarok.